I walked into my own funeral on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing a grey coat and flat shoes, and carrying a coffee I had bought from the gas station 2 blocks away because I had not eaten since the night before, and my hands needed something too. Hold. The parking lot of the church was full. I stood at the edge of it for a long time. I counted the cars. 43. 43 cars of people who had driven here on a Tuesday afternoon to mourn me. And I was standing in the parking lot, in a grey coat, alive. Completely, entirely, fully alive. My name is Hannah Graves. I am 32 years old. I am a registered nurse. I have worked the same hospital floor for 6 years. I drink my coffee black. I fold laundry while watching television. I call my mother every Sunday morning, without fail. I am not dead. But my husband had filed a death certificate that said otherwise. He had called our friends, our family, my colleagues. He had told them I had died in a car accident while visiting my sister 2 states away. He had planned this funeral, chosen these flowers, written the obituary that described me as a beloved wife who had been taken too soon. He had also, and this is the part that made my hands stop shaking and start calculating, collected a $400,000 life insurance payout 11 days before this funeral. 11 days. Before burying an empty casket. Before standing in a front pew, with his head bowed pretending to grieve a woman who was very much alive, and standing in the parking lot of his performance, holding a gas station coffee. I want to tell you how I got here. Not the funeral. How I got to the parking lot. How a woman who was a good wife and a careful person, and someone who trusted completely, ended up standing outside her own funeral, watching her husband cry for an audience. Because this story does not start with a death certificate. It starts 8 months earlier, with a conversation I was not supposed to hear. And if you are new here, please subscribe and hit the like button right now before we go any further. It takes 2 seconds and it helps me keep telling stories like this one. Okay, let me take you back to where this actually started. I met Daniel Graves when I was 26 years old, in the waiting room of a mechanic's shop on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. My car had broken down 2 blocks away. I had pushed it, actually pushed it, in nursing scrubs, in the rain, to the nearest shop, because I had a 12-hour shift, starting in 4 hours, and I could not afford to wait for a tow truck. I walked in, soaking wet and furious, and the man sitting in the waiting room, with a magazine he was not reading, looked up at me and said, "Do you want my umbrella? I think it might be a little late, but the offer stands." I laughed. I was soaking wet and exhausted, and I laughed. His name was Daniel. He was 30 years old. He sold commercial real estate, and he drove a car that broke down with impressive frequency for how much money he appeared to make. He had an easy smile and a way of listening that made you feel like whatever you were saying was the most interesting thing he had heard all week. We exchanged numbers in that waiting room. We were married 2 years later. I want to be honest about our marriage, because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering at this point. It was good. For a long time, it was genuinely good. Daniel was attentive in the early years, present in the way that matters. He remembered things I said, showed up when I needed him, made me feel like being with me was somewhere he actively chose to be, rather than somewhere he had simply ended up. We bought a house in our 3rd year together. A small one. Nothing impressive. 3 bedrooms, a backyard that needed work, a kitchen that had not been updated since the 90s. Daniel said we would fix it up together, and we spent an entire summer painting and sanding and making it ours. And some of the happiest afternoons of my marriage were the ones where we were both covered in paint, arguing about whether the painting at afternoons' living room was better in cream or in white. It was cream. I was right. He pretended to concede for weeks. The shift happened slowly, the way shifts in marriages always do. Not a dramatic moment, not a fight that crossed a line. Just a gradual cooling that you attribute to stress and busyness, and the general friction of 2 people trying to maintain a life together while both working demanding jobs. Daniel's real estate business had started struggling about 2 years into our marriage. The market had softened in our area, and several deals he had been counting on had fallen through in quick succession. He did not talk about it openly. Daniel was not a person who processed difficulty out loud. He internalized, got quiet, came home later, spent more time on his laptop with the screen tilted slightly away from me. I told myself he was dealing with work stress. I gave him space. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to make sure our mortgage was covered during the lean months. I did not ask questions he did not want to answer because I respected his privacy, and I trusted him, and I believed that when he was ready to talk, he would talk. That trust was the most expensive thing I have ever extended to another person. The first sign that something was genuinely wrong came 8 months before the funeral. I was working a night shift, 12 hours, overnight, the kind of shift that leaves you walking to your car at 6 a.m, feeling like your bones are made of something heavier than bone. I came home at 6:15. Daniel was supposed to be asleep. He was in the kitchen on his phone. He did not hear me come in. The front door is quiet. I had specifically chosen a house with a quiet front door years ago because coming home after night shifts and waking him up felt like an unnecessary disruption, and so I was in the hallway taking off my shoes before he had any idea I was there. He was talking, low voice. The specific low voice people use when they do not want to be overheard. I heard 3 sentences before I made any noise. He said the policy is for $400. That should cover everything with enough left over. Pause. Then no, she has no idea. She trusts me completely. Pause. Then just give me a few more months to work out the details. I stood in my hallway, in my socks, holding my shoes. My husband was in my kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, talking about a $400,000 policy to someone I could not identify, while describing a woman who had no idea and trusted him completely. I was the woman who had no idea. I was the woman who trusted him completely. I put my shoes back down on the mat, very quietly. I went back out the front door. I sat in my car, in my own driveway, for 20 minutes. And I decided very carefully, very deliberately, that I was not going to say anything yet, because I did not have enough. 3 sentences was not enough. I needed more, and the only way to get more was to act like I had heard nothing. So that is what I did. I went back inside 20 minutes later, making deliberate noise, keys jingling, door slightly louder than necessary. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, with his phone face down and a cup of coffee already made. He looked up and smiled and said, "Hey you, rough night?" I said, exhausting. "Is there more coffee?" He got up and poured me a cup. We sat at the kitchen table together for 20 minutes, talking about nothing. His smile never wavered. Mine did not either. I am a nurse. I want you to understand what that means in terms of how I think. I work in a high-stakes environment where missing a detail has consequences, where the ability to notice something small and act on it quietly and efficiently is not a personality trait, it is a professional requirement. I have been doing it for 6 years. I am very good at it. So when my husband said something in my kitchen at 6:15 in the morning that told me he was planning something that involved a $400,000 policy and a woman who did not know, I did not panic. I gathered information. The first thing I did was find our insurance documents. We had a joint filing system, a physical one, a thick accordion folder in the bottom drawer of the office desk, where we kept everything: mortgage documents, car insurance, tax returns. I had not looked through it in over a year because Daniel handled the finances, and I trusted him to handle the finances. I went through it on a Wednesday afternoon while Daniel was at a property showing. I found a life insurance policy in my name, $400,000, taken out 14 months earlier. I had signed the application. I remembered signing it vaguely. Daniel had said it was something we should both have for security, had handed me a stack of documents one evening while I was tired after a shift, had pointed to the signature lines, and I had signed without reading carefully because I trusted him, and because I was exhausted, and because that is what you do when you trust someone. I had signed a $400,000 life insurance policy on my own life, with Daniel as the sole beneficiary. I put the document back exactly where I found it. I sat at the office desk for a while. I was thinking about the word details. Just give me a few more months to work out the details. What details does a man need to work out before he can collect on a life insurance policy? His wife has to be dead. I want to tell you that I did not jump to conclusions. That I told myself there was another explanation. That I gave my husband the benefit of the doubt, the way I had been giving him the benefit of the doubt for years. I did not. I knew, the way you sometimes know things before you can prove them. The way your body understands something that your brain is still catching up to. I knew, and knowing changed everything about how I moved through my own life for the next 3 months. I called my sister first. Her name is Becca. She lives 2 states away. We talked every week on Sunday evenings, and she was the person I called when I needed to think out loud with someone I trusted absolutely. I did not call her from my phone. I bought a prepaid phone from a convenience store 3 towns over on a Thursday morning, and I called her from the parking lot of a grocery store I had never been to. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Becca, I need to talk to you, and I need you to listen to everything before you say anything." She said, "Okay." I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the insurance policy, the timeline, the details comment. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Hannah, are you safe right now?" I said, "I think so. I think he needs me alive for a while longer to avoid suspicion," he said. "A few more months." She said, "You need to go to the police." I said, "I don't have enough yet. 3 sentences and an insurance policy is not enough." He could say he was talking about anything. He could say the policy was just responsible planning. I need more. She said, "Then what do you need?" I said, "I need to know who he was talking to, and I need to know what the plan actually is, and I need to do it without him knowing I know." Becca was quiet again. Then she said, "Okay. What do you need from me?" I said, "I need you to be the reason I am 2 states away when whatever he is planning happens." She understood immediately. She said, "Done." Over the next 6 weeks, I documented everything. Every late-night phone call. Every time he stepped outside to talk. Every financial statement I could access. Every credit card charge that did not make sense. I found 3 things that mattered. The first was a series of charges to a hotel 30 minutes from our house, on dates when Daniel had told me he was at client dinners. The second was a name that appeared twice in our joint email account, which I had never bothered to check because I had my own separate work email, and we had set up the joint one years ago for household things, and neither of us used it much. The name was Marcus Webb. He appeared in 2 emails from Daniel that were drafted, but never sent a function of the email system that saved them automatically. Both emails discussed logistics, timings, a location, the words, accident, and remote, and reported, were used. The third was a withdrawal, $12,000 in cash, taken from our joint savings 3 months before I found the insurance documents. When I asked Daniel about it, casually slipping it into a conversation about our savings, he said it was a deposit for a business deal that had not panned out, and that he had redeposited it. I checked the account. He had not redeposited it. $12,000 in cash to a man named Marcus Webb, for something involving an accident and a remote location and a report. I went to the police on a Thursday morning. I asked for a detective specifically. I had all my documentation organized in a folder, the insurance policy, the email drafts, photographed on my personal phone, the bank withdrawal records, the hotel charges, the dates and times of every overheard conversation I had noted in a small notebook I kept at the bottom of my work bag. The detective's name was Sandra Okafor. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at my folder for a long time. Then she said, "Mrs. Graves, I want you to understand that what you are describing is a serious allegation, and we will take it seriously. But I also want you to understand that what you have here is circumstantial. It is strong circumstantial evidence, but a good defense attorney would find ways to explain most of it individually." I said, "I know. That is why I need your help getting the rest." She looked at me. She said, "What are you proposing?" I said I want to disappear. Temporarily. I want to go to my sister's house, 2 states away, and I want everyone, including my husband, to believe I am dead. And I want to see what he does. Detective Okafor sat back in her chair. She said that is not standard procedure. I said I know. She said it is also not without risk. I said I know that too. She looked at my folder again. She said give me 48 hours. She called me back in 36. What Detective Okafor and her team put together over the following 3 weeks was not exactly what I had proposed, but it was close. I would go to Becca's, officially, with a cover story that I was taking some time to help Becca with a home renovation project she had been planning. This was plausible. Becca had mentioned the renovation to Daniel at Christmas, and he had no reason to question it. While I was at Becca's, while I was technically absent from our home and our daily routine, Detective Okafor's team would be monitoring Daniel, his phone, his communications, his movements. If Daniel made a move toward reporting my death, if he contacted anyone about an accident or filed anything official, they would have him. The risk was that he might not move quickly enough, that he might sense something, that $12,000 might buy enough caution to make him wait. I accepted the risk, because the alternative was going back to my house and sleeping next to a man who had paid someone $12,000 in cash for something involving the words accident and remote and reported and pretending I did not know. I had been doing that for 6 weeks already. I was done. I left on a Monday morning. Daniel drove me to the airport. He carried my bag to the departure's entrance. He hugged me for a long time. He said, "I'm going to miss you. Come home soon." I hugged him back. I said, "I love you." I meant it once. I said it then because I needed him to have no reason to suspect anything was different. He waved as I went through the doors. I watched his reflection in the glass as I walked away. He was already on his phone before I reached the security line. I was at Becca's for 19 days. 19 days of waiting. Of jumping every time my prepaid phone rang. Of lying in Becca's spare bedroom at night, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. Of calling Detective Okafor every morning and hearing nothing yet. Stay put. We are watching. Becca was extraordinary during those 19 days. She did not hover. She did not ask the same questions, repeatedly. She made food, and she let me be quiet when I needed to be quiet, and she sat with me when the quietness got too heavy. On the 14th day, she sat across from me at her kitchen table with 2 cups of tea, and she said, "Whatever happens, you are not going back to that house." And I said, "I know." She said, "And whatever happens, you did the right thing." I said I keep wondering if I missed something earlier. Some sign that was there, before the kitchen conversation. She said probably there were signs, but you trusted him. That is not a failure. That is just what trust looks like. I thought about that for a long time. On the 19th day, Detective Okafor called me at 7 in the morning. She said he filed a death certificate yesterday. I sat up in bed. She said, "He reported that you died in a car accident on a rural road approximately 40 miles from your sister's house. Single vehicle. No witnesses. He says he was notified by local authorities." I said there was no accident. She said no, there was not. We have been monitoring the route he described. There is no accident. No report. No local authority notification. He fabricated it. Entirely. I said Marcus Webb. She said we picked up Marcus Webb this morning. He is talking. I said, "What did Daniel pay him for?" She said to file a false accident report in a jurisdiction 3 counties over from your sister, and to confirm the story, if anyone checked. I said, "And the body?" She said Daniel filed for an expedited cremation, citing your previously expressed wishes. He had a document, forged, claiming you had requested cremation in the event of sudden death. I had never requested cremation. I had never expressed any preference about what happened to my body after death. Because I was 32 years old, and I had not thought about it, and you do not think about things like that when you trust the person you are sleeping next to. I said, "What happens now?" Detective Okafor said, "Now we let him run the play. We let him collect the insurance payout. We let him plan the funeral. We document every single step. And then we come in." I said, "And the funeral?" She said he has scheduled it for Tuesday. I said, "I want to be there." Long pause. She said, "Hannah, that is not." I said, "I want to be there. I want to walk into that church, and I want him to see me." Another pause. She said, "We will have officers present. You will not be alone." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I have been sure about very few things in the last 8 months. I am sure about this." Tuesday, grey coat, flat shoes, gas station coffee, 43 cars in the parking lot of the church I had been married in 6 years earlier. I stood at the edge of that parking lot, and I felt something I was not expecting. Not anger, not satisfaction, something quieter and sadder than either of those things. Grief, maybe. Not for my death, obviously, but for the marriage I thought I had. For the man I thought I married in this building 6 years ago. For the version of my life I had believed in completely until 6:15 on a Wednesday morning when I came home from a night shift and heard 3 sentences that rearranged everything. Detective Okafor was beside me. Plainclothes. She looked like any other person attending a funeral. Dark coat, quiet shoes. But I knew there were 4 more officers positioned around the church, and 2 more inside. She said, "You do not have to go in." I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "Okay. Stay beside me. Do not approach him directly. We will make contact at the appropriate moment." I said, "I understand." We walked across the parking lot. The church doors were open. I could see the backs of 43 cars worth of people already seated inside. I could see flowers, white lilies, which I have always hated, which Daniel knew I hated, which meant he had either forgotten or had chosen them for the performance of it, because white lilies look like grief flowers, and he needed this to look like grief. We walked in. I want to tell you what it felt like to walk into your own funeral. I have tried to describe it to people since, and I have not found the right words yet. It is not like anything else. The closest I can get is this. Imagine every person who has ever loved you, sitting in a room, believing something terrible has happened to you. Imagine their faces. The specific, real, unperformed grief of people who genuinely believe you are gone. Your colleagues from the hospital in the 3rd row, looking smaller than you have ever seen them look. Your neighbour from down the street, who brought you soup when you had the flu 3 winters ago, sitting with her hands in her lap and her eyes red. Your mother in the 2nd row, with her shoulders curved inward, the way shoulders curve when the body is trying to protect itself from something too large to process. Your mother, my mother, was in the 2nd row. She had flown in from wherever Daniel had told her I was dead, and she was sitting in the 2nd row of a church that smelled like white lilies, and she believed her daughter was gone. I almost could not keep walking. Detective Okafor's hand found my arm. Just her hand on my arm. Steady. I kept walking. Daniel was in the front row. He was wearing a dark suit. His head was bowed. His shoulders were doing the thing that shoulders do when someone is performing grief to a room, a very slight, very controlled movement that looks like crying from a distance, but does not have the right rhythm up close. I know what real grief looks like. I see it in my hospital every day. This was not it. We were 3 rows from the front when the woman beside him, I did not recognize her. I would find out later she was someone he had been seeing for 7 months. The person he had been on the phone with that morning in my kitchen touched his arm. He looked up. He looked directly at me, and his face did something that I will remember for the rest of my life. It did not go pale. It did not collapse. It simply stopped. Every performed expression drained out of it completely in less than a second, and what was left underneath was nothing. Just nothing. The absence of anything. The face of a man who had just seen the one thing he had not accounted for in any version of his plan. His wife, alive, standing 3 rows behind him in a grey coat holding a gas station coffee. He stood up. He said, "Hannah," just my name, in a voice I had never heard from him before. Not the warm voice from the mechanic's waiting room. Not the quiet voice from 6:15 in the kitchen. Something new, something that had no practiced quality to it at all, because there was no version of this moment he had ever prepared for. The room turned. 43 cars worth of people turned and looked at me. My mother made a sound I cannot describe. Detective Okafor stepped forward. She said, "Daniel Graves, I am Detective Sandra Okafor. I am placing you under arrest for insurance fraud, filing a false death certificate, and conspiracy to defraud." The church went completely silent. Daniel looked at me for a long time. He said, "How?" I said I came home early from a shift. He said, "The kitchen." I said, "The kitchen." He closed his eyes. And then the officers who had been positioned around the church moved in, and Daniel Graves was handcuffed in the front pew of the church he had chosen for my funeral, and walked out through the same doors I had walked in through 30 seconds earlier. My mother reached me before I had fully processed that he was gone. She grabbed me with both arms and held on in the specific way that mothers hold children they thought they had lost. And I let her hold me for a long time, right there in the middle of the aisle between the white lilies he had chosen for my performance death. I let her hold me for a very long time. Here is where I am now. Daniel pleaded guilty, not to everything immediately. His lawyer tried several angles, but Marcus Webb had already given a full statement, and the financial trail was documented thoroughly, and the false death certificate, and the insurance payout, and the forged cremation preference document, all together made a defense that was going to be very expensive and very unlikely to succeed. He pleaded guilty to insurance fraud, filing a false official document, and conspiracy. He is currently serving a 7-year sentence. The insurance company recovered the payout. The money I did not know he had taken from our joint savings, the $12,000 paid to Marcus Webb, came out of the sale of our house. I did not fight for the house. I did not want it. I did not want anything from that marriage that I would have to look at and remember. I kept my car, my nursing license, my prepaid phone, which I have not thrown away, and probably never will, because it is the object that represents the moment I stopped being passive about my own survival and started being deliberate about it. My mother stayed with me for 3 weeks after the funeral that was not a funeral. We talked more in those 3 weeks than we had in the previous 3 years. Real talking, the kind that happens when something enormous has passed through your life and reorganized your understanding of what matters. She said to me one evening, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you had not overheard that conversation." I said, "I know." She said, "You saved yourself." I said, "I had help." She said, "You asked for help." That is not the same as being saved by it. I thought about that for a long time. She was right. The thing I am proudest of, not the investigation, not the documentation, not even the decision to walk into that church, is the moment in the parking lot of the grocery store when I made the call to my sister. Because I could have talked myself out of it. I could have told myself I was jumping to conclusions, that I was a tired nurse who had misheard something, that the man I had been married to for 6 years was not capable of what 3 sentences and an insurance document suggested he was capable of. I could have gone back inside and made myself fine. I chose not to. I chose to trust what I knew over what I wanted to believe. And that choice, that specific Tuesday, in a grocery store parking lot with a prepaid phone, is the one that kept me alive. I am back at work, same floor, same colleagues who sat in the 3rd row of that church, looking smaller than I had ever seen them look. The first day back was strange, in the way that only a very specific kind of strange can be the kind where people who grieved you are now standing in front of you, and none of you know quite where to put the experience. My colleague Janet, who has worked beside me for 4 years, and who I found out had given a reading at the funeral, hugged me in the break room on my first day back, and cried for about 10 minutes, and then pulled back, looked at me and said, You look exactly the same. I said I feel a little different. She said good different or bad different. I thought about it. I said just different. Like something that was slightly out of focus got sharp. She nodded, like she understood. Maybe she did. I went to see Detective Okafor 3 months after the arrest. Not for any official reason. I just wanted to say thank you in person. And I wanted to do it when I was not in the middle of everything. We had coffee in a small place near the precinct. She asked how I was doing. I said honestly, better than I expected. She said people are resilient in ways that surprise them. I said, can I ask you something? She said, of course. I said when I came to you with that folder, when I told you what I wanted to do. Did you think I was right? She looked at her coffee for a moment. Then she said, I thought you were the most organized person who had ever sat across from that desk. And yes, I thought you were right. I said, but you made me wait 48 hours. She said I needed to know you were going to be steady, that you were not going to do something impulsive that would compromise the case. I said, and? She said you were the steadiest person in this entire investigation, including my team. I drove home from that coffee feeling something I had not fully felt since before the mechanic's waiting room, and the easy smile, and the marriage that turned out to be something I had been living inside of without ever fully seeing. I felt like myself, the version of myself that existed before I handed my trust to someone who treated it as a resource to be used. I am getting reacquainted with her. It is taking time, but she is there. She was always there. She just had to save her own life before she could get back to the business of living it. If you made it to the very end of Hannah's story, thank you. This one was not light, not easy, and you stayed all the way through. If any part of it got you the kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, the prepaid phone in the grocery store parking lot, the moment she walked through those church doors, or her mother grabbing her in the aisle, drop it in the comments below. Tell me which moment stopped you. I read every single comment, and they remind me every time why these stories need to be told. If Hannah's story moved you, share it right now. Send it to someone who needs to hear that the moment you stop being passive about your own life is the moment everything changes. That trusting what you know over what you want to believe is not paranoia. It is survival. Like this video if you stayed until the last word. And subscribe, because I have more stories coming that are going to stop you completely in your tracks. I will see you then.